Discovery of the concept of self is a process that, in many ways, can be a hindrance to the fulfillment of self. This the constant feeling like, oh, I gotta figure out who I am, what I like, what is cool to me, and therefore, what is cool that I can do that would be beautiful, that would be true to me, and wouldn't be just effort of me trying to mimic somebody else, me trying to gain crowd approval or whatever it might be. Because I care so much about putting out cool things and doing cool things and making beautiful art, I as I start making anything, I constantly have this self-awareness where it's like, why am I doing this? Is this me, or is this me mimicking something that I'm really into right now? Is this me trying to do this because I think it'll get me this level of attention or money or whatever, And so often I've looked backwards and looked at things and seen the good and the bad in them. I've seen, okay, I understand the kernel of authenticity within this, and I'm proud of myself for being able to do this. But a lot of the times I look and say, this was me trying to be like this person. This was me doing this for this external validation for that reason. Or just more plainly, this was me just doing something on a whim for no reason. And I mean, it didn't get me anything. It might have been fulfilling in the moment. It might not have been. It might have been, emotionally crippling in a way because I felt like I wasn't able to execute it in the way that I needed to or the way that I ought to. But in hindsight, it didn't matter at all. And the more that I read about philosophy or other great artists, the more I realize and just accept that this feeling of self-discovery is just a constant. It's a constant. It's always going to be here. And so I can't ignore it just for the sake of putting things out. And this is not an original idea, but it's just an idea that I need to hold firm to, which is to have a bias towards action, have a bias towards publishing, have a bias towards releasing, putting things out there publicly, because that wrestling with self-discovery is always going to be trying to pull me towards perfectionism, pull me towards stasis, pull me towards inactivity, while I go discover myself, go figure out what it's all going to be about before actually getting shit out there. And this isn't, it's almost, it's frustrating to say this because it's just like, yeah, obviously it's not new information, but it's just something I have to keep reminding myself. And it's weird. I don't know if other creative people experience this weird sense of like vertigo, but for me, because I deal with this questioning, this level of self-awareness so often, I feel like a lot of the times when I finally break past it, it's born out of just acknowledging it. Maybe a better way to put it is acknowledging my over analysis kind of is my artistic trope in a way. I'm ever since back in the day, even when I was rapping, it was like a lot of the time, even if it didn't show through exactly in the songs that came out, a lot of the times in the songs that didn't come out, it was because I was like, okay, this is too masturbatory. It's just me self-satisfying and talking about, what I'm thinking. And when I say it like that, it's like, well, that's cool. That's what it's supposed to be, right? In the moment, it felt a little bit too much navel gazing. And that's still a guilt that I hold on to, is that feeling of navel gazing. And that's also part of the struggle with this whole balance between intrinsic validation and extrinsic validation. Is it's like, if what internally drives me could be perceived as navel gazing to others, am I gonna prevent myself from doing what I want to do because I'm worried about what other people are gonna think? Well, I shouldn't, by one token, but by another, you have to have some level of self-awareness, so you don't just drive yourself down a rabbit hole that's leading nowhere. And that's a constant anxiety that I deal with. That fear of the rabbit hole, that fear of an endless path that leads to nowhere, and just getting lost in the woods. Getting lost in a mental woods is, it feels like my journey through life is just walking through a barely paved road. Like, I see that there was once a path here, and there's some hints of a path, but I'm constantly worried that I'm falling off the trail, and I don't really know where this is heading. So what do we do about that? Yeah, I wish I could answer that. I really do. I've been thinking recently about like how we're living in the information age and how that changes the way that we use these mental models that have kind of just become the norm, and that we were kind of just ushered into as we grew up, and that our parents gave us, or that messaging from media gave us. But I feel like a lot of things are really different now, just in looking at people. When I just look at the way people act and live in this world, it doesn't feel like the old models hold up. I can't look at anybody from generations before mine that I know in my personal life, or even that I've experienced through the internet or social media. For the most part, everybody seems very lost because the environment now is just so different, so changing, so chaotic. And I want to connect and really understand the connection and the interplay between self-discovery and this access to information, because it's like in the old model there were less inputs. You go about your day, you have, yes, still, like, if we're talking about over the past 100 years, you still have like radio, TV, newspapers, all that, magazines. You're still getting exposed to things, so it's not like you're completely insular and just exposed to what's in your tribe. But you know there's this thing about the old model. There's just this sense of, this is my life and I'm going through it. There's not much of a sense of what shaped me to be this way. How is this directing my future course of action? What are the implications of my past that I don't consciously perceive currently? How can I bring them to present awareness so that I can have a more holistic understanding of myself and try to, well, and then, what ought I be becoming? And then how do I aim what I am towards that? But, and as I go through this whole description of this process, the merit in it sort of becomes questionable, because what is the ends? I mean, a lot of the history of philosophy seems to be what I called it kind of earlier. It's a lot of navel gazing. It's a lot of maybe over awareness, overthinking, over analysis, because to what end? Granted, I do think that when you publish the insights, and if they have merit, if they're valid, if they actually push things forward, then some people can observe those later, or even now, and those ideas can spread and make a better society, or at least just enrich things and hopefully make a better society. But again, if you're just holding it all inside, to what end? I think a lot of the time it's not personally beneficial. It's much more secure to defer the benefit of a original idea to society at large by just putting it out there and dispersing it, rather than trying to hold it all inside and just test things for yourself. Because I don't think that one person is enough of a testing ground for an idea. An idea might work for a billion people, but it might not work for the person who came up with it. So given that fact, and even beyond that, it might destroy the person who came up with it, or it might look like a bad idea in the life of the person who came up with it versus a great idea in the lives of billions of others. So although you know, I don't pretend to have groundbreaking answers, and I don't even pretend to have taken in a bunch of groundbreaking information or anything. If anything, I recognize the normalcy and just how mundane a lot of things are, and that there's this quality of mind to sort of, uh, make things fantastical because it's fun. And I hold that to that entertaining aspect of self education or self philosophy or whatever it might be, self discovery. It's fun. So, for all those reasons, I I think it's important to recognize the limits to self discovery, to overthinking, to analysis, and in seeing those limits, kind of seeing the leverage and the potential in just that bias towards release, that bias towards action. Because I don't really think I'm responsible for my ideas. I don't think any of us are responsible for what we do or who we are, what we've become. It's so much an interplay of external factors. But, often I feel like things pop in that are interesting. And whether that interest might amount to, that's a little smile, or whether it could be groundbreaking on a societal level, I don't think it's in my capacity to know. And yes, there's an element to this all that's navel gazing. Yes, there's an element to this all that's self absorbed, maybe even narcissistic, but I'm not even sure that those are necessarily negative qualities to begin with, despite the fact that they're looked at that way often. And even if they are, again, just because it has that quality on a individual level doesn't mean that the idea will have that quality on a grander scale or even just to one other person. So it's what I'm really getting at with this is just this reminder of removing the self from self discovery and just letting it be discovery. And in order to support that discovery process, action bias, release bias, and humility in error, um, beyond humility and error, just depersonalization from imperfection.